KCCI chief political reporter Amanda Brooker is live at the U.S. Capitol tonight.
Amanda, the president consistently touts his economic policies. What stood out to you tonight?
Well, Stacey, Ben, I think what stood out is that the president was really trying to take a victory lap tonight on his economic policy, even as many Iowans and Americans seem to not really feel relief on the economy. Yet Biden tonight highlighting things that he sees as his top accomplishments, things like historic job creation, inflation trending down, and low unemployment rates across the country. He also unveiled new efforts on things he says will cut costs for Americans, things like capping prescription drug costs and taking aim at lowering housing costs. Earlier today, I spoke with the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Treasury to talk about why he says Biden's actions on the economy have made Iowans' daily lives better.
We're in a position where unemployment is below 4% for historic more than 2 years. We've had 16 million small business applications in this country, which is more than at any other point in history over a 3-year period. And we're seeing inflation come down. A great sign is when you think about gas prices. Gas prices at one point were down $1.90 from their peak in the summer of June 2022 because of actions the president took.
And that message was something that we heard echoed in Biden's speech tonight, but Republican Iowa Senator Joni Ernst pushes back on that message. She says many Iowans are still struggling to make ends meet because of the president's economic policies.
We have food prices that are 20% higher than where they were when President Biden took office. So we have seen this year after year rise of inflation, and it's affecting our families, and their incomes are not keeping up with that. I haven't seen medical costs come down. I haven't seen food prices come back down. I haven't seen those gas prices come back down. So our families are struggling.
And Biden really started his speech tonight talking about foreign policy and a threat to democracy. Something that stood out to me was how often he mentioned his predecessor, not directly referring to Donald Trump, but he did say that his predecessor was a threat to democracy when condemning the January 6th attack and President Trump's relationship with Putin of Russia. Ben?
Amanda, a lot of people were watching how the president delivered his speech. What does this say about questions concerning his mental capability?
They absolutely were, Ben. That was a big focus going into tonight. And I think what they saw was largely Biden spoke with passion. There wasn't really any major gaffe. He even joked during his speech, during his address to Congress tonight. But all of that comes amid concerns, growing concerns about his age. A Des Moines Register poll that was released just this week found that the majority of Iowa adults, 56%, feel Biden is too old to serve a second term. Now, the White House press secretary told me Biden's performance would prove otherwise. But Iowa Senator Joni Ernst exclusively told me that what she was watching for tonight was to see a clear contrast between Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
When you put President Biden up against President Trump, with President Trump, you do see a lot more energy, you see a lot more focus. President Biden is going to have to hold very tightly to whatever is on the teleprompter. If he wanders off of that teleprompter, he probably won't be able to get back onto that teleprompter. So there is such a staggering difference between the physical and mental state of our two candidates.
One of the reasons the president has been able to accomplish all of these things, historic pieces of legislation that's going to change Americans' lives, Iowans' lives for generation, is because of the experience. With age comes experience. The president was senator for 36 years, vice president for 8 years. What we're seeing with the economy, 14 million jobs created, unemployment under 4%, wages going up, that didn't happen by accident. That happened because of this president's experience.
And KCCI was one of 7 local stations from across the country that was invited by the White House to talk to senior officials and cabinet secretaries about Biden's message and how his policies have impacted the lives of Iowans. Live from Washington, D.C., I'm Amanda Rooker, KCCI 8 News, Iowa's news leader.
Amanda, thank you. And Democrats would argue there's questions about Donald Trump's mental capabilities as well. So again, it's an argument both sides of the aisle are having at this point. Some special guests from Iowa are in D.C. for the State of the Union.
And the politicians usually bring guests to the gallery to put a face to an issue they want to highlight. Iowa's 3rd District Congressman, Republican Zach Nunn, brought Derek and Kathy Kidd. They lost their son to a fentanyl overdose. President Biden addressed the opioid crisis during his speech tonight.
Iowa Senator Republican Joni Ernst, who we've heard from, brought Hagit Chen. She's the mother of an American teenager being held hostage by Hamas terrorists. Ernst wants President Biden to prioritize freeing those hostages. There are several other big moments from President Biden's address. We'll go back to Amanda Rooker live in Washington, D.C. in just a few minutes. She'll discuss Republicans' response to Biden's approach to abortion access.